Hello students. In today's class we will discuss something about the Bohr's model for hydrogen atom and hydrogen-like species. Bohr's model can be applied to all those systems which have only a single electron in them like hydrogen atom. To understand what do we mean by hydrogen-like species, let us take few examples. For example, helium has atomic number 2. It means that helium atom has 2 electrons in it. But if it loses 1 electron, the helium ion thus formed will now have only one single electron. In a similar way, lithium with atomic number 3 has 3 electrons. But if it loses 2 electrons, the bivalent lithium cation thus formed will now have only one single electron. All such systems are called hydrogen-like species because just like hydrogen, they have one single electron in them. Bohr's model of an atom can be applied to all such systems which have a single electron. In today's class, we will discuss some important postulates of Bohr's model. The very first postulate states that the electron in hydrogen atom can move around the nucleus in circular path of fixed radius and energy. This means that not any kind of arbitrary orbits are allowed within an atom. The electrons can move only in certain orbits which are of fixed radius, and when electrons are moving in these orbits of fixed radius, their energy is also fixed. The question that comes to your mind now is, what kind of orbits are these? To get the answer, let us get to the second postulate of the Bohr's model. The second postulate states that only those orbits will be allowed in an atom where the angular momentum of electron is an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. Try to understand this. For a body moving on a linear path, the linear momentum p is expressed as m times v, that is mass times its velocity. But for a body such as an electron which is revolving around the nucleus, the angular momentum is expressed as mvr. Now the second postulate states that only those orbits would be allowed in an atom where the angular momentum mvr of an electron becomes an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. H here we all know is Planck's constant, and the value of Planck's constant as discussed in the previous classes is 6.626 into 10 to the power minus 34 joule seconds. I know the question that comes to your mind is why? Why only these kind of orbits are allowed? This postulate obviously means that the angular momentum cannot take any arbitrary values. The angular momentum of electron should always have a value which is an integral multiple of h by 2 pi, which means that angular momentum is quantized. Quantized means something which can take only discrete values, something which can take only fixed values. So understand the postulate carefully. It states that the electrons would be allowed to revolve only in those orbits where the angular momentum is quantized. That is, it has to be an integral multiple of h upon 2 pi. To get the answer to why is it so, we will have to wait for some time to understand some very interesting concepts which we are going to look at in our next session. Let us now move on to the third postulate. The third postulate states that the circular orbits of electrons are called stationary states of electron. They are called stationary states because the energy of electron remains constant in these orbits. Understand it, they are not called stationary states because electrons are stationary. The electrons are moving. They are called stationary because the energy of electron is fixed. Such stationary states are denoted by principal quantum number n. For example, let us say this is the nucleus and these are the orbits around the nucleus which are allowed within an atom. Now, how do you denote these orbits? They are supposed to be denoted by the principal quantum number n, where for the very first orbit around the nucleus, the value of n is equal to 1. For the second orbit around the nucleus, the value of n will be 2. For the third orbit around the nucleus, the value of n is equal to 3. So, such stationary states are supposed to be denoted by principal quantum number n. Also, as we move away from the nucleus, or as the distance from the nucleus increases, the energy of these stationary states also would increase. It would mean that n is equal to 3 would be at a higher energy than n is equal to 2, which would mean that for n is equal to 1, that is the first orbit around the nucleus is going to be at the lowest energy. And as we move away from the nucleus, the energy of these stationary states would also keep on increasing. Let us now look at the next and a very interesting thing. Bohr said that the electrons can move in circular paths of fixed radius. To calculate the radius of any such fixed path, we also call it the Bohr's orbit, he gave an expression r is equal to a naught times n square by z. What is a naught here? So a naught here is a constant and its value is 52.9 picometers. Try to understand this. Suppose if I want to calculate the radius of the first orbit in hydrogen atom, then the radius of the first orbit r will be equal to a naught, which is the constant 52.9, times n square. N here is the orbit number. Suppose if I am calculating the radius of first orbit, the value of n here is 1. So which would mean 52.9 times 1 by z is the atomic number. In case of hydrogen atom, the atomic number is 1. Therefore, the radius of the first orbit is equal to 52.9 picometers in case of hydrogen atom. In a similar way, suppose if I want to calculate the radius of the second orbit, this would be 52.9 times, for the second orbit n is equal to 2, so n square would mean 4, by the atomic number, which again in case of hydrogen is 1. So 52.9 times 4 will give me the radius of the second orbit in case of hydrogen atom. Suppose if I want to extend the same concept to hydrogen-like species, let us say I want to calculate the radius of the second orbit for He plus ion. The radius of the second orbit for this ion would be equal to a naught, which is 52.9 times n square. N for the second orbit is 2, so n square would mean 4, by z. In case of helium, z, that is the atomic number, is 2. So the radius of the second orbit would be 52.9 times 2. So this is how, using this formula, we can calculate the radius of any orbit in hydrogen atom or hydrogen-like species. The actual formula given by Bohr was something like this. R is equal to n square h square by 4 pi square m e square times 1 by z. But in this formula you can see that h is a constant, pi is a constant, mass of electron m is a constant, E, that is the charge on electron, is constant. If you place the values of all these constants, the value that you get is 52.9 in picometers or 0.5 to 9 if it is in Armstrongs. What varies here is only n square and z. So if I want to find the radius of the first orbit, I would place the value of n as 1. For the second orbit, it would be 2. For the third orbit, it would be 3, and so on. Z for hydrogen atom would be 1. For helium, He plus ion would be 2. For lithium, Li2 plus ion would be 3. For beryllium, Be3 plus ion would be 4, and so on. Using this formula, we can thus calculate the radius of any orbit in hydrogen atom or hydrogen-like species. Let us go on to the next very interesting thing. As we know that the energy of electron in any of these orbits is also fixed. The energy in any of the Bohr's orbit can be calculated using this expression of energy. The same expression is also written as minus 13.6 z square by n square if the energy is expressed in electron volts. Understand, if you are expressing the energy in joules, then the constant has a value 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18. But if you are expressing the energy in electron volts, then the constant has a value of minus 13.6. Now let us say I want to calculate the energy of electron in the first orbit of hydrogen atom. So in the first orbit, the value of n would be 1, and the z, that is atomic number of hydrogen, is also 1. So the energy in the first orbit would therefore be equal to minus 13.6 times 1 by 1 electron volt. So that is nothing but equal to minus 13.6 electron volts. In a similar way, if you would have wanted to find the energy in the second orbit, the value of n would have been 2. For the third orbit, the value of n would have been 3. Z again for hydrogen is 1, but can be extended to hydrogen-like species. For hydrogen-like species, you all know for He plus Z would be 2. For Li plus 2, the value of Z would be 3. So in this way, using these formulas, we can calculate the energy of electron in any of the Bohr's orbit. And in the previous slide, as you must have seen, using the formula of radius, we can also calculate the radius of any Bohr's orbit. That is what the first postulate said, that electrons revolve around the nucleus in orbits of fixed radius and fixed energy. You also know what are these orbits. Only those orbits are allowed where the angular momentum mvr is an integral multiple of h by 2 pi. You now also know how to express these orbits by principal quantum number n. And as the value of n increases, the energy of a given orbit also increases. Let us look at the next interesting postulate, that electrons can always jump from one orbit to another. If the electron jumps from any of the lower orbit to a higher orbit, it will do so by absorbing some energy, and vice versa, that if electron jumps from any higher orbit to a lower orbit, it would do so by emitting some energy. The amount of energy that is absorbed or is emitted is always equal to the difference in the energies of the two stationary states. For example, let us say that if electron jumps from n is equal to 3 to n is equal to 2, so the amount of energy that is going to be radiated out, delta E, would be equal to E2 minus E3. You can always remember this, that delta E always has to be equal to E final minus E initial. That is energy of the final orbit, that is the orbit where finally the electron lands, minus the energy of the initial orbit, that is the orbit from where the electron starts its transition. Since here the electron was jumping from 3 to 2, the initial orbit was 3 and the final orbit was 2. So the energy that is given out should be final minus initial. Since the final orbit was 2 and the initial was 3, the energy given out delta E should be E2 minus E3. On the other hand, suppose if this was the case, that electron by absorbing energy was moving from second to the third orbit. So now the initial orbit is orbit number 2 and the final orbit is 3. In this case, the amount of energy absorbed delta E should now be equal to E3 minus E2. So this is what the postulate states, that the electron can always make such transitions from lower to higher orbits or higher to lower orbits. But in any such transition, the amount of energy absorbed or emitted would always be equal to the difference in the energies of the two orbits between which the transition takes place. You must have noted that the energy of electron is always expressed with a negative sign for all the possible orbits. How's the energy of an electron negative? Let us try to understand this very important thing. The negative sign here means that the energy of electron in an atom is actually lower than the energy of free electron at rest. So what do you mean by free electron? A free electron at rest is an electron that is infinitely far away from the nucleus or is not under the influence of the nucleus, and it can be assigned energy value of 0. Mathematically, this corresponds to setting n equal to infinity. So if I set n equal to infinity, then the expression of energy of an electron is equal to minus 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 z square by n square. But here in this equation, if n is equal to infinity, the energy would take value of 0. So this is what I mean to say, that when electron is at infinite distance from the nucleus or is not under the influence of the nucleus, so the electron at infinity has energy equal to 0. Now as soon as electron enters into the orbit of an atom, it is attracted by the positive nucleus. And when the electron is attracted by the nucleus and is present in orbit n, the energy is emitted due to attraction and thus its energy is lowered. So at rest, the electron has energy equal to 0, and when it enters the orbit, it emits energy, and therefore the energy is lower than 0, and that is the reason for the presence of negative sign in this equation. Also remember that a system which is at a lower energy is supposed to be more stable. Therefore, the negative energy of electron also depicts a greater stability of electron with reference state 0, that is, which corresponds to n is equal to infinity. Here we complete with all the postulates of the Bohr's model of an atom, and now let us understand what is the success of Bohr's model. The success of Bohr's model is that it is able to predict all the frequencies that are present in the hydrogen emission spectrum. If you have looked at my previous lecture, you all know that the emission spectrum of hydrogen consists of a series of lines classified as Lehman, Balmer, Paschen, Brackett and Fund. The success of Bohr's model is that it is able to predict all these frequencies which are present in the emission spectrum of hydrogen. It is also able to predict correct size of hydrogen atom, and it also works for all those systems which have only a single electron in them. Let us try to understand the success of Bohr's model in predicting the emission spectrum of hydrogen. The emission spectrum of hydrogen results because of the various jumps that electron takes while returning from its excited state to the ground state. In the picture that you can see here, n is equal to 1 corresponds to the ground state of electron, whereas 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 are the excited states. While returning from any of these excited states to the ground state, electron can take various jumps. Let us understand this. Let us say that the electron is present here in its excited state in n is equal to 7. Now while returning back to the ground state, the electron may directly jump from n is equal to 7 to n is equal to 1. Or the electron may first jump from n is equal to 7 to n is equal to 2 and then may jump from n is equal to 2 to n is equal to 1. Each of these jumps will correspond to a particular frequency emitted by an electron. The frequency emitted by an electron would depend upon the energy which is given out during that transition. We all know that the energy of electromagnetic radiation is expressed as E is equal to h times nu, which means that energy is proportional to the frequency of the emitted radiation. Suppose if electron takes a jump of a large energy, then it would also have to give out the radiation of a very high frequency. Thus, when electron jumps from any of the higher orbits to n is equal to 1, it emits a radiation of a very high frequency. All such emitted radiations belong to the ultraviolet region of the spectrum and constitute Lyman series. In a similar way, any electronic jump that corresponds from a higher orbit to n is equal to 2 gives a radiation of a lower frequency. All such radiations belong to the visible region of the spectrum and constitute Balmer series. Following the same pattern, any jump that occurs from any of the higher orbits to n is equal to 3 or n is equal to 4, that is a jump from a higher orbit to n is equal to 3 or a jump from a higher orbit to n is equal to 4, they'll all give out radiations of still lower frequencies. Such radiations would go into the infrared region and they'll constitute Paschen, Brackett and Pfund series respectively. Thus, we have explained that how various jumps give out radiations of various frequencies and how these frequencies can be classified into Lyman, Balmer, Paschen, Brackett and Pfund series. One another very interesting thing about the hydrogen emission spectrum was the Rydberg's equation. Rydberg gave a famous equation relating these spectral lines in terms of their wave number. The famous Rydberg equation can be expressed as 1 by lambda, that is nu bar, is equal to 109,677 times 1 upon n1 square minus 1 upon n2 square centimeter to the power minus 1. In this famous Rydberg's equation, when the value of n1 is 1 and that of n2 is greater than 1, that is 2, 3, 4 and so on, the wave numbers that you get would go into the Lyman series, and obviously these are corresponding to those jumps which occur from any of the higher orbits to n is equal to 1. In a similar way, in the same Rydberg's equation, if the value of n1 is placed as 2 and that of n2 is greater than 2, that is 3, 4, 5 and so on, the wave numbers that you get would belong to the Balmer series, and obviously they are all corresponding to the jumps that occur from any of the higher orbits to n is equal to 2. And you can again in a similar manner go ahead by placing the value of n1 as 3 and n2 as 4, 5, 6 and so on. The wave numbers you get would now go to the Paschen series. One extraordinary success of Bohr's model was that it was able to explain the famous Rydberg's equation. Let us try to derive the famous Rydberg's equation using one of the postulates of the Bohr's model, that is postulate number 3, where he states that whenever electron jumps from any of the higher orbits to a lower orbit, the energy given out by an electron will be equal to the energy of the final orbit minus the energy of the initial orbit. The energy of the final orbit can be expressed as minus 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 times z square by n final square. In a similar way, the energy of the initial orbit can be expressed as minus 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 times z square by n initial square. But since in this equation the value of z is equal to 1, because for hydrogen the atomic number is 1, therefore I can take 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 as common, and then what remains in the bracket is 1 upon n initial square minus 1 upon n final square. Minus into minus here is going to give me plus, and therefore I am writing down the positive first and then I write down the negative term. Delta E now I have is equal to 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18, 1 upon n initial square minus 1 upon n final square. But we know that energy can be expressed as h nu, so I can write energy as h nu is equal to 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 times 1 upon n initial square minus 1 upon n final square. But we all know that nu is equal to c by lambda. So if I replace nu in this equation by c by lambda, I can thus write that h c by lambda is equal to 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 times 1 upon n initial square minus 1 upon n final square. If I take h into c on the other side, on the left hand side of the equation I am left with 1 upon lambda, which is equal to nu bar, is equal to 2.18 into 10 to the power minus 18 by hc. The value of h is 6.626 into 10 to the power minus 34, and that of c is 3 into 10 to the power 8 times 1 upon n1 square minus 1 upon n2 square. Or you can simply write it as n initial and n final. Now suppose if I solve this particular thing, the answer that I get over here is 1 by lambda is equal to 109,677 times 1 upon n1 square minus 1 upon n2 square, and that is what is our famous Rydberg's equation. So this was an extraordinary success of Bohr's model, that he was able to explain not only the lines that are present in the emission spectrum of hydrogen, but he was also able to derive the famous Rydberg's equation using one of his postulates. We'll go ahead and understand what was the limitation of the Bohr's model. The limitation of the Bohr's model was that it could not explain Zeeman effect and it could not explain Stark effect. Zeeman effect means splitting up of the spectral lines under the influence of a magnetic field. You know that the main lines in hydrogen spectrum are due to the jumps that correspond between various energy states. But when we place a source emitting spectrum in a magnetic field, we find that the main spectral lines split up further into finer lines, as you can see here in the picture. The splitting up of these lines indicate that within the main energy levels there are sub-energy levels wherein the electron takes some smaller jumps. But the Bohr's model does not account for any such sub-energy levels between the main energy levels. A similar kind of splitting of spectral lines is observed in presence of an electric field. This is what we call as Stark effect. So the limitation of Bohr's model is that it was unable to give an explanation for Zeeman effect and Stark effect. The other limitation, and a more important one, is that Bohr's model does not takes into account two very important principles. It does not takes into account the de Broglie's wave particle duality, and it also ignores Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You people are unaware of these principles, but this is what is going to be our topic in the coming session. Finally, the Bohr's model could be applied only to those systems which have single electron. It is a failure while explaining the systems which are having more than one electron. We call them as multi-electron systems. So with this, we come to the end of today's class, and I'll see you soon in the next class with some more interesting discussion that would be about the de Broglie's principle and the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Goodbye till then.